It's another episode of My Brain, My Heart, Sports Talk with Mike. So the NHL playoff matchups are set. I'm very excited about them actually. People might be a bit upset because they're not going to see a matchup between the Montreal Canadiens and Toronto Maple Leafs. However, I'm quite fine with it because I don't think, the whole rivalry of the Canadiens and Leafs, that would have been awesome to see. The fans, I think that would have been a great atmosphere. More so from the fans. I don't think the games themselves would actually be an incredible series to watch. I think the Boston Bruins and Maple Leafs will be a better series. More physical, more meaningful. I'm more happy to see this matchup than the Habs and Leafs. I'm not a fan of Toronto or Montreal, but I think Toronto will be a nice physical team that will really hurt Boston's Stanley Cup chances. Montreal would have been a confidence booster for Toronto. So I like the way that the matchups work out. When I first did my matchups, who I thought was going to make the playoffs when the season began, I had the Philadelphia Flyers and the Carolina Hurricanes and the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're not in it. That was in the East. And then over in the West, I had the Flames squeaking in. And I think I might have had, I don't think I had the Coyotes. I think the Flames are the only team I guessed wrong on the West. So I didn't do too bad out there. So in today's episode, I'm just going to go through the playoff matchups, who I think is going to come out on top, who's going to be the Stanley Cup champion, and give my final NHL awards prediction. So we'll start in the East. First matchup, we got the #1 seed, Pittsburgh Penguins, facing the New York Islanders. And I like the Islanders in the playoffs because I think they have a nice young team. I love Nabokov. I love Nabokov in San Jose, so I'm a big fan of Nabokov's work. And I think they have a nice team that has a lot of potential, and they're just continuously growing. So I think they'll do well. Now in this playoff, though, I have Pittsburgh over the Islanders in 5. Montreal versus Ottawa. I like this matchup more than I like Montreal versus Toronto. Just for the fact, I think it's a battle that not just of a rivalry standpoint. It's a battle of just a young talent, guys like Carlson versus Subban type deal. And I like the Montreal rookies, what they brought in. I like the fact that Ottawa went through a lot of injuries this season and still made it to the playoffs. In the end, I actually have the Ottawa Senators in 6. That's going to be my playoff upset. We'll see what happens. The Washington Capitals versus the New York Rangers. The Rangers definitely they kicked it up at the end of the season. They deserve to be there. Washington Capitals did even better. I don't really have a lot of faith in the goaltending for Washington, but I like what Ovechkin, Mike Ribeiro, Nicholas Backstrom, and the defensive men. Their defense, they just really did a good job as a whole team. So I got the Capitals in 6, and the Boston Bruins versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is the matchup for the Maple Leafs that I didn't want them to have in the first round because I don't think they can get past the Bruins. I think they're a tough opponent for the Boston Bruins, but I don't think they have enough. I think Boston, not that they heavily outmatch them in every category, but I think if you were to give the Toronto Maple Leafs a 6, if you gave them a 6 as an overall rating for everything, I'm not saying they're a 6 and everything, but just if you gave them a 6, I think the Boston Bruins are a 6.5 or 7 in each of those categories. They're just a half step or a full step ahead of them in each category. So I don't think the Maple Leafs are better than the Boston Bruins in any aspect of the game. But physicality, they might be matched up, and I think that'll be tough for the Bruins. But I have the Boston Bruins in 6. So then we go to the second round of the playoffs. Pittsburgh Penguins versus the Ottawa Senators, where Pittsburgh just continues their offensive streak, and Marc-Andre Fleury is actually going to put in a hell of a performance. I got the Penguins in 5 against the Senators, and the Washington Capitals versus Boston Bruins. I think with it being such a hard battle against the Maple Leafs, they come at it a little sluggish against the Capitals, who capitalize probably offensively. and it's going to be a hard battle where the Bruins come out on top in Game 7. Which brings us to the Eastern Conference Finals, where we got the Penguins versus the Boston Bruins. Had the Boston Bruins not played the Maple Leafs in the first round, I would have said that it's very possible the Bruins could go to the Stanley Cup Finals this year. I know I had the Penguins in my first episode saying that they're going to win the whole Stanley Cup, but if the Bruins did not have to face the Leafs, I think it would have been an easier road for them without the whole physical style. But they played the Maple Leafs, so they're going to be banged up. And I got the Penguins in 6. So I got the Penguins going to the Stanley Cup Finals over the Bruins. We'll go to the Western Conference. First matchup, the Chicago Blackhawks versus the Minnesota Wild. There's actually nothing too much I like about the Wild except for like their young guys like Jonas Brodin, Charlie Coyle, Zach Phillips, Jason Zucker, Michael Granlund. I like their young guys, and I do like Mikko Koivu a lot actually. But I don't think the Wild have enough of anything to get past the Blackhawks. I got the Blackhawks in 5. The Anaheim Ducks versus the Detroit Red Wings. I think Detroit is just lucky to be in the playoffs. They have skilled players, good defensive forwards. Their defense is lacking a bit, and goaltender shaky with Jimmy Howard, who I don't know why they extended him in the first place. But I got the Ducks in 6. Originally, I had the Ducks being upset by the Calgary Flames, so that all changed. So the Ducks are going to the second round. The Vancouver Canucks versus the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks are just getting old. The Sharks are just an old team with guys like Patrick Marleau, Dan Boyle, Joe Thornton. They're going to get outworked. They're going to get outplayed by the Canucks. And not that the Canucks are like extremely younger. It's just that I think they have a bit of a step in them. And I would trust Corey Crawford over Antti Niemi. And I got the Canucks in 5. And the last matchup in the Western Conference first round, the St. Louis Blues versus the Los Angeles Kings, where the Kings just dismantled the Blues last season. It was incredible what the Kings did to the Blues. I could not believe it. I thought the Blues were going to handle, like, just make the Kings wish they didn't make the playoffs. And I was completely wrong. This season, I think the Blues step it up. I think their goaltending switches from being horrible during the regular season to incredible in the playoffs. Just their power forwards are going to be tough for the LA Kings. LA Kings, they're very good with puck possession, but I think they kind of fall short. But I do have the Blues in 7, so it's not going to be just an easy road for the Blues. It'll be tough games. Second round, we got the Blackhawks versus the Blues, where I think it'll come down to probably the offensive games, where I think Chicago can get a couple more goals. They have a bit more offensive talent than the St. Louis Blues, for their forwards at least. And so Blackhawks in 6. And I hit on Anaheim Ducks versus Vancouver Canucks. It rhymes. I like the Ducks up front. I don't like the fact that with Victor Fass and Jonas Hillier, really, who's going to really have a good game, and that's going to be difficult. I don't like that. And defensively, the only defense I like is Francois Beauchemin. Sheldon Surrey didn't do too bad, but Beauchemin's the only defense up there. I got Vancouver in 6 over the Ducks. In the Western Conference Final, we got the Chicago Blackhawks versus the Vancouver Canucks, where they actually have a playoff rivalry, and it's just over the last 5 years, it's really gotten pretty good, pretty awesome. And no matter what, I think everything's just matched. Everything. Goaltending with Corey Schneider and Corey Crawford. Defense, you got the Canucks with Kevin Bieksa. I think Jason Garrison actually does pretty good. Danny Hamhuis, hopefully he stays healthy. And you got with the Blackhawks, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Nicholas Jarmison. And then up front, you got defense forwards like Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane, I think, is a defensive guy. Marian Hossa that played tough. Patrick Sharp, he's back and up and at him. And you got Vancouver, Ryan Kessler, who does a hell of a job. I like Mason Raymond and Alexander Burrows. And you got the Sedin brothers facing. So I think as a whole it'll be a great matchup. I got the Blackhawks in 7. I think that'll be the matchup to watch, the playoff series. In the Stanley Cup Final, we got the Pittsburgh Penguins versus Chicago Blackhawks, where you got Toews versus Crosby, because Crosby's going to be back, by the way. I forgot to mention that. Crosby will be back, and Malkin. I think Pittsburgh Penguins stay healthy throughout the playoffs, which is shocking to say that, at the least. But I don't think it's going to be fun to watch. When the Pittsburgh Penguins faced the Detroit Red Wings in 2008, the Stanley Cup Finals, I found it was very lackluster. I wasn't really into it as much. I'm going to kind of get the feeling of that. I don't think it's going to be a lot of chippiness. I think it's actually going to be just straight up hockey games where it'll be fun to watch. Just because it's hockey, right? But it's not going to be over the top exciting. I got the Penguins winning the Stanley Cup in 6 games and winning the Conn Smythe. I'm going to go with Marc-Andre Fleury. He's going to win the Conn Smythe. My playoff performers. So we'll see what happens with that. Sidney Crosby, Jonathan Toews. I think Ryan Getzlaf, even though he's booted out in the 2nd round, I think he made such a turnaround. I think he really produces in the playoffs there. Defense, Chris Letang, Alex Pietrangelo. Same thing where they lose in the 2nd round, but I think he's a very good offensive defenseman. And goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury. That's going to be my playoff performers. And my end of the year awards. We're going to start with me. I think I've done an incredible job with my show up to this point. About 54, I think today's 54 or 53 episodes in, and I just, no, I'm being an idiot, just joking around. Alright, the James Norris Trophy. I'm giving it to P.K. Subban of the Montreal Canadiens. He's a firecracker with a lot of offensive talent. I think defensively, he stepped his game up this year, and I think his offensive production, I think he tied with Chris Letang for the points lead for defensemen, and he was like, I think the games might have been just about the same. I wanted to give it to Chris Letang, but at the same time, a lot of assists did come from guys like Crosby, Malkin, and I think the Montreal Canadiens Montreal Canadiens forwards aren't as gifted as Pittsburgh Penguins. So I'm giving it to P.K. Subban, where the runners-up were Chris Letang and Keith Yandle of the Phoenix Coyotes. I think to do what he did in the desert, he produced with points, played a great defensive game, and he was a difference maker for the Coyotes. The Calder Trophy, it's actually kind of tough because you do have some points leaders with Nail Yakubov, Jonathan Huberdeau, Corey Conacher, who did phenomenal. Defensemen like Justin Schultz, and some guys that came out of nowhere, so like Alex Killorn of the Lightning, and Wirach of the Ottawa Senators. So that's very, very promising to see that. My Calder Trophy goes to Brendan Gallagher of the Montreal Canadiens. He was a hard-nosed player that he did everything. He reminds me, like Brad Marchand. I think Brad Marchand's a good player. I know. But I think he's better than Brad Marchand in every aspect. To get under opposing players' skins, to score goals, to get dirty goals, to play his the hard worker. So Gallagher gets my Calder Trophy. He did a great job for the Montreal Canadiens. Him and Alex Galchenyuk, they had both great seasons. Galchenyuk, I'm not going to even have him as a runner-up. I think I was expecting more from Alex Galchenyuk. To see Brendan Gallagher do a bit more than him, it was kind of hard for me to really grasp control of that. My runners-up, I actually got Brendan Saad from the Chicago Blackhawks. He actually did a pretty decent job playing for the Blackhawks, where he was a difference maker in certain games, and he was a very hard worker on the ice. And every time I watched a game for the Blackhawks, he was right in the middle of everything. So I like that. And Jonas Brodin of the Minnesota Wild, and he didn't really take control offensively. He wasn't comfortable, but then he started to gain like a lot of confidence in himself, a lot of faith in his shot. Defensively, he was amazing. Played a lot of minutes for the Wild, and had he maybe, and I know it's not all about points, but just watching the first few games like the first 20 games for the Wild for 2025, it felt like he wasn't in the zone when it came to helping his team on the score sheet. But then he kicked into high gear, so had he done it all year, I would have gave him the Calder Trophy. Frank J. Selke, the top defensive forward. This is amazing. I'm going to tell you my... so I have Jonathan Toews win it from the Chicago Blackhawks. He just... great face-off guy, great penalty kill fella. He just produces points while at the same time give and take, like just takeaways are pretty. I think he tied with Pavel Datsyuk with like 55, 56. And the differential between takeaways and giveaways was quite dramatic. And that's what I like about a defensive forward. You don't give up the puck. You keep the puck. And the awesome thing, I think, is that the runners-up should be teammates of his. Michael Frolik and Marian Hossa, because their takeaway levels are high. They're in both of them are in the top 10. And the takeaway differential between takeaways and giveaways is just as dramatic as Jonathan Toews. They're very, very, very close. Pavel Datsyuk has more giveaways than these two fellas. And these, Marian Hossa and Michael Frolik, Hossa produces more offensively, but Frolik, he does a lot that you wouldn't expect him to do. And both are very good on the penalty kill. They both contribute to help the team defensively. So Pavel Datsyuk, forget you, man. Forget you. The Lady Byng Trophy goes to the most gentleman-like player in the league. I got Patrick Kane of the Chicago Blackhawks win it. He had like, what, 8 penalty minutes this season while scoring about 54 points. I think Kane's a bit of a hothead, and to do that, to keep his composure, I think that's a really good job for Kane to really do that. To stay out of the box helps his team every game. The runners-up, Martin St. Louis, I think he had like 12 penalty minutes, something like that, 10 or 12. So he's always going to be consistent. He's just, his penalties were probably because the other guy flopped. And Matt Moulson of the New York Islanders. If Kane doesn't win it, Matt Moulson better win it. But he had 4 penalty minutes. He had about 44 points for the New York Islanders and 4 penalty minutes. That's 2 penalties. Which means in 48 games, he took a penalty every 24 games. That is incredible. So, if Patrick Kane doesn't win it, Matt Moulson better win it. And I hope that's how it comes out. The Jack Adams Award, it's easy. Bruce Boudreau of the Anaheim Ducks. To take the Ducks from going, like, well, I think they were like 5th worst in the NHL last season to like the 3rd best team in the NHL this season, that's amazing. I mean, he helped Ryan Getzlaf get back on track. Corey Perry actually toned it down a tiny bit, not a lot penalty-wise, and I think he brought the best out in a lot of his players. The runners-up, got to go to Joe Quenneville with the Chicago Blackhawks. I know he had them on the streak, but I don't know if it was his coaching style or Lady Luck. But, I mean, he's definitely deserving of it, as well as Michel Therrien of the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens had like the 3rd worst record, and they were in one of the top 5 teams in the NHL this season. Where I don't know if it was coaching style, same with Quenneville, but I think Montreal struggled mightily more than the Ducks. I mean, when the Ducks and Blackhawks lost, most times they came back and won the next game. The Montreal Canadiens, they did have some really bad games. The Vezina Trophy, Sergei Bobrovsky of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He always had them in the playoffs single-handedly. Not anyone else. There's no one else from the Blue Jackets that helped the Blue Jackets just miss the playoffs. They were tied with the Minnesota Wild for points, but regulation wins went to the Wild. So goal against average was around like 170. Save percentage was about 940 or something like that. He's just amazing, and if he doesn't win it, I'll be shocked. It's one of those stupid things. It'll be like the MLB awards where players win it that shouldn't win it. Well, not like MVPs, more like Gold Gloves type shit, if you know what I'm talking about. The runners-up, Tuukka Rask of the Boston Bruins, who had very great numbers, leader in top 5 in all categories, pretty much. And the second runner-up, I have a tie, Craig Anderson of the Ottawa Senators. He had, what, 1.21 goals against average. His save percentage was like 930. And then I also have Corey Crawford of the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, we had about 20 wins, maybe 4 losses. And his save percentage goal against average was pretty decent, about like 2 goals against average, 925 save percentage. And I couldn't pick, so I had to give a tie for them. Great job. And the Hart Memorial Trophy, a lot of debate. Crosby was injured, so do you give it to him? Do you give it to Steven Stamkos, who scored a lot, or Martin St. Louis, a 37-year-old who won the Art Ross Trophy, Alexander Ovechkin, who won the Maurice Rockwood Shire, or Sergei Bobrovsky. He was the MVP to his team. Oh, hell yeah, he's the MVP. I actually give the Hart Memorial to Matt Duchene of the Colorado Avalanche. I am bullshitting you. That would have been so bad of me. I shouldn't be doing anything, talking about sports whatsoever. I like Matt Duchene. He did a good job for the Colorado Avalanche this season. But the Hart Memorial Trophy, runners up, go to Jonathan Toews of the Chicago Blackhawks. The captain there, he just did everything. There was not a thing that Toews did. He rarely makes mistakes. He's just leader on and off the ice. He lets his game speak for himself, offensively, defensively. He's just incredible to watch. And then Alexander Ovechkin of the Washington Capitals. How could I not? wins the goal, the Maurice Richard trophy for most goals in the season. Up until probably the start of the second week in March, I ripped on Ovechkin from the start of the season, like most people did. And it just, I found laziness. He wasn't confident. He wasn't comfortable. Well, let me tell you something. Alexander Ovechkin kicked into high gear, and no one was better than Ovechkin. As soon as Crosby was injured, I found Ovechkin was the best player. Like, I mean, it's like he was just, oh man, I want the Art Ross trophy. I haven't seen Ovechkin play this good since probably his second season in the NHL. And he did tremendous work. I was incredible. I couldn't believe what he did, and I probably could have given it to Ovechkin. If Crosby played all the games, wasn't injured, and put up what he did, I would have given it to Ovechkin. If Crosby played all 48 games, scored around 55 to 60 points, I would have given it to Ovechkin. I really would have. But Crosby got injured, stuck around 55 points, was just phenomenal. He was just a force to be reckoned with. Every time he was on the ice, he was making things happen. So Sidney Crosby wins the Hart Memorial Trophy. If you played the extra 12 games, probably would have topped 70 points. The way that he was going, could probably hit 75. And I think this is the best Crosby we've seen at all. I mean, it felt like his whole entire game was to the level that no one could touch. And that's why he's the best player in the world. Straight up. So that's it for today's episode. If you, I would like to know who you think is going to win the Stanley Cup. If you think someone's going to have kind of like an upset, or if you don't think a team's going to move on that I have moving on, let me know. If you think someone else is going to win one of the major awards, tell me if you think my runners-up are bullshit. I want to see what people think about the Frank J. Selke Trophy, in my honest opinion, because, I mean, Taylor, they probably got to win it, but runners-up, they're probably going to have like Pavel Datsyuk and shit like that. But let's see what happens. But that's it for today's episode of My Brain, My Heart, Sports Talk with Mike. Make sure to tune in tomorrow, because tonight is the NHL Draft Lottery. Florida Panthers have the best chance at 25%. The Colorado Avalanche have the second with 18.8%. And then the Tampa Bay Lightning have something like between 12 and 15%. So, from that, tomorrow I will give my draft picks 1 through 14. And we'll see what happens. Hopefully the Avalanche get the second pick. And hopefully the Panthers pick Seth Jones in June. But let's see what happens. Have a great day. Here we are.